my friends. This is how I made a maple countertop. My son cut down a hard maple tree, and I took the logs over to the mill and had it sawed into these maple boards. It came back from the mill. It was about 5/4 thick. So I planed the boards down to 3/4, and then I ran each of the boards through the joiner so I get a nice straight square edge. So now I'm getting ready to join these boards together to make a countertop that's 30 inches wide and 8 feet long. And so I plan to use my biscuit joiner to install several biscuits in these seams, and that'll help to hold the boards together more securely than just gluing the edges. So this is how I go about it. I mark these lines on the boards. I've got these biscuits. They're going to be 16 inches apart. And so I'm just marking these lines so that I'll know where to line up my biscuit tool. And here we go. And what this tool does is just cut a groove in the end of that, in the edge of the board, so that you can slide this biscuit in. So that's how those boards will be glued together, and that you can see how that biscuit will be inserted into each board. It just gives it extra strength. So we're going to go along with the biscuit joiner and cut all of our grooves. And there's indicators on that tool there that help you to get it set up so that you're cutting right in the center of that 3/4 inch thick board. So now I've got all the biscuits in their dry fit. I like to always put my projects together dry and take a good look at them, make sure everything's going to fit right before I glue it up. So this is what I'm doing now, and there's several biscuits down through there, so it takes a little bit to get the two boards slid together. It makes a real tight fit between those two boards. So here I'm just going along on the next board and inserting those biscuits, and then we'll slide the next board in there, get that fit. Now, as I mentioned, I took this log to the mill and had it sawed into these boards, and the boards have been stacked up in my barn for several years, drying. This lumber was not kiln dried. And so sometimes you'll have some warp in those boards, and the biscuits kind of help to take that warp out. As you get things slid together here, it'll help to line those boards up straight. So that's what the biscuits look like if you've never used a biscuit joiner. And you're just going to slide those two boards together. And once I make sure that everything's going to slide together dry, of course, I've got to take this thing apart and apply glue. I just use Elmer's Carpenter's glue. And then I've got a couple long bar clamps here. You can see that I'll clamp that countertop, squeeze it together there, and also vertically I put a couple clamps on. So that thing sat there all day, good 24 hours overnight, and then I cut these pine boards for the bottom of the countertop, and I'm screwing those onto the bottom of the countertop just to have something when I go to install this thing. I'll be able to screw up from the bottom into those pine boards to hold it on to where this thing's going to go. Now the next day I spent sanding this countertop, and I've got an orbital sander here. I start out with 60 grit sandpaper and go over the whole project and work my way up to 220 grit. Now the next thing I'm going to do is make an edge for this countertop all the way around. And so I don't want a sharp edge. I'm going to use this round off cutter to make a nice round edge on my piece of edge molding, I guess you could call it. And so what I do is I take a nice straight maple board and run it through this cutter, and then I'll rip the board into the width that I want for the edge. Now I think I ripped it 2 1/8 inches, I believe it was, wide after I ran it through this cutter a couple times. And so this is what it looks like on the edge of the countertop. And it gives the appearance that that countertop is thick, like a butcher block, when the maple boards are actually only 3/4 of an inch thick. Now it's time to glue things up, and of course I've cut 45-degree angles in the ends of the boards, and I'll squeeze a little bit of this glue onto the edge of my countertop there, and then I use a little paintbrush to spread that glue out evenly before I stick the board on. Now I've already drilled the board, and that by the way is cherry. That edge is made out of cherry, and I've already drilled through and stuck a couple of finishing nails through that edge board. And so after I apply the glue, I'll stick just the ends of those nails in the holes that I've already fit dry, and I'll be able to tap that thing right in there. You'll see what I mean. So here I am, I've got the nails and I'm just lining them up. And then I tap it together, and then after I've got it in there, then I drive the nails home. Now these are just number 4 nails, the little finishing nails, and I've pre-drilled that cherry. It's very hard, you know, maple and cherry is very hard wood, and so I've pre-drilled with a little small drill bit for each one of those finishing nails. And I don't plan to countersink those heads. I found lots of times that it's less noticeable if you just leave that head of the nail rather than trying to countersink it and fill it with wood putty or something. And so I just pound them in and leave them. So now we're going to take off the long edge piece. I've got it on there like I mentioned. Everything's dry fit. And I just use one finishing nail in each end to make sure everything is going to fit. And now I'll go along this one and do the same thing. Apply that glue and use the brush to spread it out nice and even. And then we'll get this final edge piece put on this countertop. Now once again, because I've dry fit this long piece, and I've got a couple of finishing nails in that piece already, after I apply that glue I can just hold it up there and lightly tap those finishing nails in to get it lined up. There we go. And then I go back and put in several nails down through there. Now here I forgot to glue the 45-degree angles there. So I had to pull that back off and put a little glue on there. Hold that end right together nice and firmly. There we go. And there you can see that little drill bit. And of course I put a nail right in the end of that 45 to hold that nice and tight. And if you pre-drill, you won't split your boards. So you've got to have just the right size drill bit so that nail still is snug as it's going through that hole. And that'll make a real nice corner for you right there. Now the finish I use on a project like this is called Rock Hard Tabletop Urethane Varnish. And you wind up with a really hard, glossy finish. Now I've got the first coat on, and you put on a light coat, and then you sand it lightly with 320 grit sandpaper. And so I'm just going over that entire thing with this 320 grit, and you're just scuffing up the surface of that wood. And like I said, the first coat that I put on is a real thin coat, and then I'll apply 2 more coats. There'll be 3 coats in all, and that'll produce just a beautiful finish. Now, I don't know where I got this brush, but I love this brush. It has some very soft bristles. It's almost like feathers on the end of that thing. And you can really sweep all that fine dust off your project. There won't be anything left down there after I'm done brooming that off with this brush. Okay, so we've got the first coat on and sanded with 320 and broomed off and really cleaned up good. And now it's time to apply the second coat. Now, I should mention that when you use this product, you'll want to have some really good ventilation in your shop. And I've got all my windows open and the door, and I've got a fan set up in the doorway blowing out. So I'm sucking air through the open windows and out the doorway, and I'm moving enough air so that I've got a good exchange going on, but not so much that I'm stirring up dust in the shop. And after I'm done applying this varnish, I will shut that fan off and just stay out of the shop until the varnish dries. Now I'm going to show you how I go about applying varnish or paint or any of this type of thing as far as that goes. The object of painting is to get your paint or your varnish onto the surface. And so a lot of people brush too much. You want to dip into that can and get enough of that varnish on your brush to completely cover. And I've got a good light source above, so I can keep an eye on that surface and make sure I'm getting it covered. But you just kind of slap that varnish on there to begin with, and make sure you've got good coverage. Now, you don't want to have it puddling or anything like that. I mean, you want to have it even as you're applying it, but you're going to put on plenty of varnish. The first coat was very light. Now this second coat I'll put on a little bit heavier, and after I get this edge done right here, always in the direction of the grain of the wood, I'll go back and now use very light strokes straight with the grain of the wood and a comfortable reach, then go down and brush that part into what you've already done. And you'll wind up with, you won't even be able to notice your brush strokes in the surface when you're done. Now this is after the third coat. So I've sanded the second coat and broomed it off real good, and then I've applied my final coat. Now I guess I didn't mention what this countertop will be used for. It's going to be placed in my son's convenience store, and it's kind of a utility countertop. He'll set his cash register on there and so on. So this thing is going to take a real beating, and with that rock hard tabletop finish, it should hold up real well. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.